Hello, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys. You are now entering Season 2 of the Swan Hockey Podcast. Swan Hockey is flying around the junior hockey world one episode at a time. You'll experience things dreams are made of, as well as things of terrible nightmares. Strap in, hold on, and enjoy the ride. And now, Swan Hockey.
All right, well, Glenn, what's going on, man? I appreciate you doing this.
My pleasure, Eric. My pleasure.
Yeah, I know it's a busy time. I know you've been busy. It's funny. I have friends that are like, "Oh, you do hockey, right? So during the summer, you're off." I'm like, guys, no, absolutely not. Like it never stops. It just changes.
I just literally had this conversation 5 minutes ago with one of our GMs. Like there is no vacation in hockey. There's no break. It's just it's a 12-month season. It's just shifting from one thing to another.
Yeah, I honestly, I mean, me personally, I kind of find that the in season is actually a little bit more like, not that it's less work, but it's like more predictable in a way.
It's definitely more predictable. Yes. It's more enjoyable because you're actually watching hockey or being part of it or coaching right. So it's definitely fun when it's the off season. That's when, just so many different conversations are being had. And so it's lots of rumors floating around, that's kind of how that goes.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm really appreciative and I'm really excited that we're doing this because in my opinion, I think the USHL is one of the most misunderstood leagues out there. And I think where it's misunderstood is I think so many people have always tried to compare it to the CHL. And really, your goals have never been the same, right? The USHL has had a very distinct set of goals that they've been dominant at for so many years, right? The goal of the USHL was always, put players in NCAA. And, get them drafted along the way, right? But the goal where the USHL was dominant on a world stage was getting the guys ready for college. And the second they were ready for college, they would move them on, right? If you had a top end 18-year-old that was ready to go to Boston University, he went. He didn't play in the USHL till he was 20. Right, you guys moved them on.
Would you be talking about Yegorov? Maybe.
I'm saying in general.
Sure Yegorov.
Lots of
he left.
Examples.
He left in the middle of the season. He left at the break. BU needed a goaltender, and the team helped him get there. I mean, that's what it's about. And look what Yegorov did for BU. I don't think BU's in the Frozen Four last year if it wasn't for Yegorov. So I think that's certainly the case. We are as focused on making sure we train players effectively enough to be drafted in the NHL and to move on to college hockey. The thing that everybody has to understand is that there's a lot more work in college, right? So there's about 500 new Division I freshmen each year. And, in the NHL, in the history of the league, what are we on 109 seasons now? In the history of the league, there's been less than 9,000 players ever that have earned this rookie status. 9,000. So, and that's hard for most people to believe, but that's actually the number. Maybe it's a hair up from there. 9,200, 9,400. So getting a job in the National Hockey League as a player is really hard. And it's rare, but I'm happy to report that, our league does a great job in both areas. And I think our model, and I think when you say it's misunderstood, I think you're right. I think people look at one model and say, oh, they play almost 70 games and it's like the NHL. Well, these are 16 to 20-year-olds. They shouldn't be treated like NHL players. These are young developing players, and we follow very similar college type schedule where we play 92% of our games are played Friday, Saturday. Means we're training and practicing the rest of the week. So I think that's the part that's really misunderstood. There are a lot of other junior teams that don't get nearly the practice time. We certainly try to maintain that 2-to-1 practice time. But it's not always easy in some of the other leagues that have a tighter condensed schedule, a longer runway. We play 62 games as part of our regular season, and we have that debate. We have that debate annually where is 62 too many? We don't have anybody pounding the table. Hey, we need more games. It's always a debate of should it be 58? Should it be 60? Should it be 62? And so you're trying to find the right formula. And so I think that is like such a misunderstood part of the league, at least from the professional side. But the proof is in the pudding. We've had more drafted players coming out of the USHL than any other individual league in the world. Now, the CHL likes to compare itself all three leagues. Well, the CHL really only plays 8 games in a year. They play the Memorial Cup, and there's only 4 teams in it. So each individual league, when you stack us up, we've had more drafted players by a lot. It's not a small insignificant thing. I think in the last 6 years.
But now, with that said, though, you guys are including alumni and the NTDP, right? Which necessarily isn't, not necessarily wrong, because, like, again, that's your model, right? Your model is push the guy out.
We don't count alum. We count the alum differently. So when you look at just the NHL records, because the NHL will indicate, where a player was coming from. And I'll give an example. We get a couple of Minnesota players every year that play split season. They start the year with us. They play 15, 20 games. They go back, play their high school season, and then they come back to us. Now, they'll play more games in the USHL in a given season. But the NHL, if that player is drafted, the NHL will credit that high school player to Minnesota high school hockey, because they say, well, he played a full season of high school. That's where he played a full season for, even though he may have played a lot more USHL games. So, and that's fine. We're not going to hem and haw about things like that. So we only count the players that the NHL says came directly out of the USHL. And when we count those players, we've had 239 drafted players, or 237 drafted players out of the USHL directly. That's more than any other league.
See, you guys announced something different on your website this year for the draft. I was going by the numbers that you guys announced.
So if you count, so we went by, I think you saw a number of 53. So that counts the players that are 1 year out, college draft, the players that were drafted in college, or those Minnesota players that did split season. So we do publish 2 numbers, but solely going off the NHL number, we have more drafted players than any other league in the world.
Yeah, I've never seen that. Like I said, and that's what I meant by alumni. Like you're counting the 1 years out. And
no, we don't count them in the NHL doesn't count them that way. So for example, Macklin Celebrini played for Chicago Steel. We'll count him in that 53 number, right? If it was his draft year. But the NHL will credit him as coming out of college. All right. So so we'll count them in a different pot. That goes into a different column. So in a recent broadcast by the NHL Network, they did the graphic. They put it together based upon the data, and they illustrated that the USHL had 40 drafted players, and then the league's subsequent to that in numeric order. And as I said, if you look at our numbers, and I'll send you the graphic, happy to share it with you.
I'd love to see it.
If you see the numbers. And we keep a running tally on all of this, because data does tell a story. It doesn't tell the whole story, but it tells a big part of it. Yeah. And I know the CHL likes to blend all 60 of their teams and saying, "Oh no, we had more drafted players." And okay, when you count 60 teams together, sure, but the reality is a player can only play for one league and one team at a time.
Well,
that matters.
And my point too. So a couple things. I'm looking at it now. You guys announced 30 this year, which was put you ahead of the Quebec Major Junior League, but behind the OHL and the Western Hockey League. Which 30 is a ton. Right? 30 is a lot.
Where are you getting that from? That's not correct.
Your X account.
It was 40.
Your X account.
Where you got to tell me where you're seeing that, because that's not correct.
Yeah, the USHL X account. Okay. I can send it to you too, but my point.
Yeah, send it to me, because that's not ringing a bell.
Yeah, and my point in this too is that, again, different model where it's apples and oranges. And I don't even necessarily think the comparison is fair, right? That's how I started this off. Like, I don't necessarily think the comparison is even fair, because you guys, when you get that 18-year-old that's still in his draft year or whatever, but is ready to go to college, you guys push him off, right, to college. That's why you're not getting the direct, the quote unquote direct draft pick from that player, because that was never your intention. Your intention was, hey, get the kid ready for college, move him on. We would love to get the direct draft pick out of the league, but if we can move him on to college before he's eligible or before he's drafted, that's what we want to do, and we celebrate that, right? Like, that's always
that's what's in his best interest,
right?
Because
so
and I think you see the
I think it's an
tagline
unfair comparison to begin with.
It's time for the Season Pass Point Unlock Code for Episode 13. The Episode 13 Point Unlock Code is a red line. Enter the code at www.swanhockey.io to receive your points. Season Pass is free to join. To join or to learn more, visit Swan Hockey Digital at www.swanhockey.io. And now, back to the show.
I think you've seen a tagline that we use. It's our development model, but it's at your pace. And so if BU calls for Yegorov, like, we're happy to see him go to college in the middle of the season. That's not a vision shared by every league. We want to advance our players onto the next level of hockey as part of the overall development model. And I think, the proof is in the pudding. Right now, I think we had something about 280, about a quarter of the NHL is made up of USHL alum. And they're accounting for over 77,000 games played of that group of alumni. And it's a big number. And so, as I said, but look, the point of all of this should be, for all of us, it shouldn't be about the stats. It should be about growing the game, making the game bigger than it is.
100%.
We don't need 64 Division I programs. We need, 128 Division I programs. We want to be as big as any other collegiate sport. And I think that, that becomes a game changer. So I think those should be the things that everybody is focusing on. I saw a player was excoriated for making the choice to not go to his junior team and go on to college. And I think that's a shame. We shouldn't be looking to identify players that have to make a choice to do something that's in their best interest. And I think certainly going to play Division I college hockey as opposed to junior, when you're ready, it's got to be right. And listen, the college coach has that responsibility too, to make sure he's pulling a player in when he's ready. And so there is, we've seen players go on that weren't quite ready, but they adapt and they find ways to catch up. And listen, look what they're competing against. You go into college as an 18-year-old freshman. What are you competing against? The average age of a college hockey player is like 23. So you're competing against guys that are 5 years older than you. It's not easy. But again, I'll use Macklin Celebrini as a great example. He plays a year, and look at the kind of year he had. Now, granted, San Jose didn't have a great year, but he had a great year. That's what matters.
Yeah. And that's why, that's why, my whole point was, two different, the goals have always been different, right? Like, I was going to, just what you just said, I was going to bring that up myself, was you had a team in the CHL that, in a roundabout way, like, I don't think they came out, I'm trying to remember the statement that was made. I don't think they came out and said like, oh, we're furious at this kid, but you could tell that there was frustration in that statement that the kid left and is going to the NCAA, where you guys, I've never seen that from you guys ever, right? It's always been celebrated. Hey, we're moving this kid to the NCAA. Like, even when you look at some of the, the highest end players in the CHL versus the highest end players in the USHL over the years, you can't compare them. And, people, I feel like people would compare them, but you can't, because the USHL has always, hey, you're ready to move on, go. Like, it's almost impossible to have the top end talent in the USHL at 19 and 20, because you go to college. You don't stay in the USHL.
If you're top end, you're already off to college,
right?
And
it's different.
that's the way it should be. Developing for the next step, and I think I saw a player. I'm trying to remember who said it recently. It might have been James Higgins, and said, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and for every single player, it's going to be slightly different. Not every player develops at the same pace. Not every situation is right for every player. And so that's the thing. It's not about, it shouldn't be about the instantaneous glory. It should be about what's the long-term goal for the athlete. And as I said, some players, can thrive. They have the physical and mental maturation, and at the age of 18, and others, it takes more time, and that's okay. Right. It's a challenge getting young people to understand that, but I think better athletes, top athletes, do get it, and have a vision of getting to how to get to the next level. And we've clearly demonstrated that. We had a large number of players that will go off to Division I college hockey this year, and we'll have the same next year. And we provide an excellent opportunity for players to develop at their own pace, and that's really what it's all about for us.
Yeah, for sure. Now, with all these new rule changes and everything, right? The goals have always been different. Now with these rule changes, everybody, everybody's kind of in the same boat now. So that comparison may get even stronger now. What for going forward for the USHL? What is your guys' mindset? Is it business as usual? Are you more trying to compete with the CHL now? What's the mindset there? Like, again, you've always had two separate goals. What's the mindset going forward now?
Yeah, I think culturally the U.S. I think the U.S. the U.S. hockey culture has always had the mindset of going to college. Like, that is, we want to get to college hockey, and there's a lot of opportunity at 64 Division I programs. You've got, I think, 76 Division III programs, and so I think as a country's mentality as it relates to hockey is it's a pathway to get to college and play collegiately. And so I don't think that changes. We are competing in North America for the age group of players of 16 to 20. So that doesn't change. I think the mindset of the CHL is, I think you've seen some of their comments. I think the general manager from Medicine Hat was quoted in a TSN article by saying, look, we're going to do everything we can to keep our kids from leaving to go to college hockey. And they implied that the USHL would do the same, and that's actually not the case. We're not going to try to stop our kids from going to college. We're going to do everything we can to get them there. So, and there's been some other comments that have been made that, this is not a way to develop for the National Hockey League. And I think if you look at the National Hockey League, I think they're saying something completely different. I think the National Hockey League is recognizing that college hockey is a great pathway to develop players. And when you look at these programs and look what they offer, I mean, they're phenomenal facilities. They're bringing every aspect of athlete development to bear, from nutrition to weight training to all of just, sports psychology. And there's so many things that these schools are doing now to offer athletes. And it's a great environment. And the life skills you learn there's nothing better. So, I think college hockey is going to explode. You get a couple of SEC schools, you get a few schools out on the West Coast, and the next thing you know, like, we're going to be making a fast race to a much larger college hockey presence. So I think that those are important things. And again, it comes back to what? Growing the game. Yeah. How do we grow the game together?
Absolutely. And hockey, obviously is very different than every other sport for all intensive purposes. I've always viewed, the NCAA as almost like one of the, almost like a minor league for the NHL. I mean, you look at baseball, you'll have guys, the MLB utilizes all the way down to their single A. You don't have that in hockey, right? It's a completely different structure, right? Different model. And the NCAA, for all intents and purposes, is almost like a level of the minor league system for the NHL.
Well, I think one of the differences, the CHL teams are a player gets drafted. If he doesn't stick with the NHL team, he's sent back to the CHL because he's by agreement, they can't go to the American Hockey League, which I think, if I'm a general manager, I would want all options open for my prospects,
Yeah, I think
whether that's college, the American
I think
League,
they could
so
send
on.
one that's 19 years old. So they used to, the 20-year-olds could go. Now I think they're allowed to send one that's 19.
Yeah, it's a one player per team. I still think that's not in conformity with the agreement, but I think they're going to get some kind of a handshake, and those are going to be the top players, and that's a good thing. That helps in player development. For players that don't want the college path, what's their next challenge? When you see a player that's capturing 2 to 3 points a game, he's mastered that level. And it's time to move to the next level. So I think that's those are some of the challenges that they'll deal with, and we'll have our challenges. The one thing I'm really pleased about, though, is the sport in the United States is growing. It is growing, and you're seeing more facilities come online. There are more players registered than ever before. And I think Canada has some challenges that they're going to have to figure out, because there's a lot less players registered today than there was 10 years ago. And so I think Frank Saravalli did a piece on that last Thanksgiving and illustrated the numbers, something like 85,000 less players playing hockey in Canada than there was 10 years ago. And that's a big challenge. And so, our numbers, are in the positive territory, and I'm pleased with that. And I think that bodes well for us. And I think once the dust settles on all of this, it'll be back to, us looking after by majority, American players, and the CHL will look after Canadian players. And that's okay. I mean, as I said, look at the recent international results. I think at some point, I think Canada's World Junior team was eliminated by Czechia that had 12 players on it from the CHL. So at some point, you have to start looking at, making sure that the sport and the ecosystem stays strong. I think about that as it relates to even college hockey. College hockey is only 62% American. And those players, many of those players who don't go on to professional careers, come back and coach and are referees and hockey directors. And that's vital to our American hockey ecosystem. So these are conversations. There's some big discussions that need to be had. And we can't look at just tomorrow. We have to look at where we want the sport to be 10 years from now. And doing that and looking for where we want to be 10 years from now requires us to do some things today that may be challenging and difficult when we're talking about growing the sport. And hopefully we're all willing to come together and be good stewards of the game and make sure that we're putting the pieces in place necessary so that we have a vibrant sport 10 years from now.
Yeah, 100%. So I wanted to ask you, and I think everybody's wondered this for a bit. In your eyes, will we ever see the day where the USHL competes in the Memorial Cup? Or is that something that you guys would even want?
I'm not going to, it's not easy for me to speak to that, because that's obviously a decision our board would make. And they should, that's something that the CHL has built, and that's their event. I mean, that would be no different than us saying, hey, we want them to come and compete in the Clark Cup. I think there will be a lot of discussions around how to build a better program for North American junior hockey for this elite level. And, if there comes a day when the CHL wants to send us an invite to the Memorial Cup, I'm fairly confident that our organizations will want to have that discussion. I attended the Memorial Cup 2 years ago. I saw the event, and as I said, I think it's I think it'd be great to get an invite and have that conversation. It all remains to be seen, but that's not a decision we would make. That's their event. So the CHL would have to do something with some level of intentionality. What I would love to see, though, if you're asking me like, hey, what could be something, I would love to see some kind of North American championship that's, backed by the NHL, and it really becomes something, an even bigger property, which I think can happen. I think when you saw what happened with the Four Nations tournament, when you get regular media covering your sport, that's a big deal. And to see regular media outlets covering, not the sports side, it's just the regular big media covering, the Four Nations. That was great for our sport. It was really a spectacular thing. I was told that when Finland played, half the country watched. Half of their country was watching them play in the Four Nations.
And
so that to me is like, if that is not a signal that we can do this thing with some degree of national pride and put some stakes in the ground and have some we could blow this out if we have the mindset to do it.
Yeah, I mean the Four Nations was awesome. I remember the Canada-US game, like where it was the 3 fights right off the bat. I was out. I was in a bar. I was at a bar. And that place was going nuts. Like I've never seen a building that's not a hockey rink going that crazy for hockey. Like it was insane.
It was spectacular. I was there at the final game, and it was something. It was really something to behold, and everybody had a lot of pride. And we get to overtime, that game could have gone either way. And we had some crazy bounces, and they got some crazy bounces, and that's just the way it goes. And that's the script. But man, did it? I think it did. I think it far exceeded what the NHL's expectations were. I just don't know how you ever go back and not have this again. This was just so good for the sport, and hopefully we'll see that come up again. I mean, you've got the Olympics in 26, and so I guess there's always a lot of competing things that have to be considered. But that was one of the most memorable hockey moments. I think maybe even next to I'll never take anything away from our 1980 team, but that Four Nations was something spectacular, pretty high up on the scale of great events.
Yeah, for sure. Hey guys, our new merch drop is live now on SH360. Visit 360.swanhockey.com and you can access it now. Once an item is gone, it may never return. You can also check the time capsule for older items. All SH360 purchases have season pass points attached. Just make sure that you use the same email address on SH360 as you do for Swan Hockey Digital. For more information or help with season pass, join the Discord.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Swan Hockey Podcast. We remind you that season pass points are available to listeners. For more information, please visit www.swanhockey.io. Until next time.